Joanna Yates was born on the 19th of April, 1985 in Hampton, Hampshire, England. She was the only child in the family of David and Teresa Yates, who surrounded her with love and care. From an early age, she showed interest in art and design. She loved to draw, design houses and landscapes, and her children's drawings amazed parents with their detail. Her parents supported her hobby, took her to museums, and bought books on architecture and design. Joanna grew up in a comfortable middle-class family, where she was instilled with responsibility and independence. At school, she not only received good grades, but also actively participated in public life. She played sports, attended art clubs and volunteer programs. Teachers remembered her as an initiative, open and inquisitive girl who easily found a common language with her peers. Joanna decided to connect her future with design and urbanism. After graduating from high school, she enrolled at the University of Reading in the Faculty of Landscape Design. It was a conscious decision. She dreamed of creating beautiful and functional urban spaces, not just designing buildings. At the university, she proved herself to be a responsible and motivated student. She not only successfully studied, but also participated in competitions, interned at large architectural firms. After graduating from university, Joanna moved to Bristol, one of the most developed cities in the UK. Here she got a job at Building Design Partnership, BDP, a prestigious architectural company specializing in urban design and landscaping. Her colleagues immediately appreciated her professionalism and kindness. She quickly gained respect in the team and, according to her superiors, had great potential in the field of architecture. She designed public spaces, parks, residential areas, and dreamed of eventually opening her own design studio. But work is only one side of her life. While studying at the university, she met Greg Wright. He was also an architect, and their common interests quickly brought them closer. They were the perfect couple, ambitious, creative, active, dreaming of the future. After graduating from university, they decided to move to Bristol and start a new chapter in their lives. Together, they rented a cozy apartment in the Clifton area, one of the most prestigious and safest areas of the city. This area was famous for its beautiful streets, ancient buildings, cozy cafes, and friendly atmosphere. Their life in Bristol was full of plans. They discussed the possibility of buying their own house, thought about getting engaged, dreamed of getting a dog. Despite Greg's frequent business trips, their relationship was strong. They trusted each other, always supported each other, and tried as much time together as possible. Friends of the couple recalled that they almost never quarreled, and Joanna was a real support for Greg. Their life together was filled with travel, walks, meetings with friends, dinners in restaurants, and plans for the future. Joanna loved Bristol. For several months of living in this city, she had managed to get into its atmosphere. She often walked along the embankment, visited local galleries and coffee shops. One of her favorite traditions was Friday nights with colleagues when after work they gathered in pubs, discussed projects, and just rested after a busy week. Joanna Yates's life was going great. She was building a successful career, was in a happy relationship, and enjoyed every moment. No one could have imagined that all this would end so suddenly and tragically. The 17th of December, 2010 began for Joanna Yates. As an ordinary day, nothing foreshadowed trouble. She woke up early, had coffee and a quick breakfast, and went to work at the Building Design Partnership, PPP, in Bristol. This was the last working day before the Christmas holidays, and Joanna was looking forward to a 2-day vacation to spend time with her family. There was a festive atmosphere in the office. Colleagues exchanged gifts and discussed plans for the holidays. Joanna, as always, looked happy and carefree. In the evening, after finishing work, Joanna went to the pub with her colleagues to celebrate the upcoming Christmas. It was her favorite tradition to relax with friends, laugh, and share stories after a difficult week. As always, she was the center of attention, joking and showing no signs of anxiety. At 20 o'clock, Joanna said goodbye to her colleagues and went home. That was the last time she was seen alive. It was a cold evening and the streets of Bristol were covered in snow. Joanna often walked this route, and the way home was well known to her. However, something went wrong that time. Her boyfriend, Greg Wright, who was on a business trip to Sheffield, later recalled that he texted Joanna around 20:30, but received no response. He thought she might be busy or had already gone to bed. However, on the morning of the 18th of December, When Greg tried to contact her again, her phone was turned off. It seemed strange to him, but he decided not to panic and sent another message. "Morning, my love. How are you?" There was no response. On the 19th of December, Greg's anxiety increased significantly. Joanna was always in touch, even when she was busy. But 2 days of silence was completely uncharacteristic for her. He kept calling and texting, but her phone remained unavailable. He started calling her friends and colleagues, hoping that she might be at one of them. But no one has seen Joanna since Friday. Greg didn't know what to do. On the evening of the 19th of December, he returned to Bristol and went straight to Joanna's apartment. When he opened the door, he felt that something was wrong. An alarming thought flashed through my head. What if she's at home? When he entered the apartment, he immediately noticed that Joanna's phone was on the table, but she herself was not there. Greg had a clear feeling that something serious had happened. He couldn't figure out where she could have disappeared to. The apartment was eerily silent. Greg tried to call Joanna again, but when he heard the phone ring, he realized that she couldn't be far away. However, she did not answer, and this fact increased his anxiety even more. Where is she? Why was her phone in the apartment, but she disappeared? It was something strange and frightening. Unable to wait, Greg dialed the emergency number 911 around 20 o'clock. His voice was trembling when he reported Joanna missing. "My girlfriend is missing. I came home and she's not here. She's not getting in touch. Her phone is here, but she's gone," he said in an anxious voice. The call to the police was the first step in an investigation that would soon reveal shocking details and lead to one of the most high-profile events in Bristol's life. Police arrived at Joanna Yates' apartment within 30 minutes of Greg Wrighton's call. The team of investigators was led by Detective Inspector Phil Jones. At that time, the police did not have a clear understanding of what they were facing. Could it have been an unauthorized disappearance, abduction, or something worse? First of all, the investigators examined the apartment where Joanna lived. At first glance, everything looked in order. Things were not scattered. No signs of a struggle were found. Locks and windows remained locked. There were no signs of forced entry. However, a few disturbing details immediately caught my eye. Her jacket and shoes were in place, which seemed strange considering the cold weather outside. The phone, keys, and wallet were also left in the apartment, which made the version of voluntary withdrawal unlikely. There was a bottle of cider on the table, which Joanna had bought the evening before her disappearance, but her pizza was not there. This fact seemed especially strange to the police, because it was logical to assume that when she returned home, she would have eaten her dinner. Investigators began interviewing neighbors, hoping to get at least some clues, but no one heard any screams, no sounds of fighting, or even footsteps that could indicate an uninvited guest in Joanna's apartment. This further confused the investigation. How could it be that she disappeared without a trace? If she was abducted, why didn't anyone notice? The police initially considered the possibility that she had left on her own, but Greg and her parents categorically rejected this hypothesis. Joanna did not plan trips, did not warn about her intention to leave somewhere, and had never disappeared without an explanation before. Everything indicated that something unusual and possibly criminal had happened. The police understood that time was working against them. The longer Joanna remained missing, the less likely it was to find her alive. They had no witnesses or clear evidence, but there was one obvious way for further investigation: to find out her last movements. Investigators began checking the recordings from surveillance cameras installed in shops, banks, and other establishments on her route home. Soon, at the Tesco Express, just 500 meters from her house, they found the first really important clue. The cameras recorded Joanna entering the store at 8 p.m. on the 17th of December. She calmly walks between the shelves, chooses a bottle of cider and a frozen Tesco Finest pizza with tomatoes and mozzarella. Her behavior did not cause alarm. She did not look worried. No one was following her, and there were no signs of a threat. At 8:45 p.m., she paid at the checkout and left, heading towards the house. This recording was the last confirmed evidence that Joanna was alive. After leaving the store, her trail literally ended. The police checked other cameras located along her route, but there was no footage of her returning home. This did not mean that she did not get to the apartment. It was just that there were no cameras on a certain part of the way. However, the situation was becoming more and more frightening. Now the investigators knew for sure. At 8:40 a.m. she was in the store. left at 8:45 a.m. and headed home, after which she disappeared. How could a young woman disappear without a trace at a distance of several hundred meters from the house? This question was now facing the investigators in all its acuteness. The next few days after Joanna's disappearance passed in agonizing anticipation. The police continued to investigate, but no new evidence emerged. Investigators carefully checked the area where Joanna lived, the Clifton area, interviewed neighbors, friends, colleagues, and analyzed her bank accounts and phone calls. However, all these efforts did not lead to a positive result. Every day of the investigation yielded no new leads, and all the efforts of the investigators remained fruitless. Life in Bristol continued, but for Joanna's family and the police, her disappearance became an increasingly unsolvable mystery. A week has passed, and no trace of the girl has been found. The only thing available was a video from the Tesco store's camera, where she was captured alive, but what happened after that remained unknown.
5 days after the body of Joanna Yates was found on Christmas Day 2010.
On the 25th of December, Christmas morning, the silence of Bristol was broken by a terrible discovery. Around 9 a.m., a man walking his dog in Fayland noticed a dark silhouette in the snow. When he got closer, he saw the body of a young woman. He immediately called the police. When the experts arrived at the site, they quickly fenced off the area. An initial examination of the body showed that there were no signs of a struggle. This meant that the girl had not been dragged from place to place. She had already been brought here dead. She was wearing only tights and a t-shirt, and faint strangulation marks were found on her neck. These signs indicated that Joanna was most likely killed on the same day she disappeared, and her body was later moved here. The autopsy confirmed the assumptions. The murder occurred on the day of her disappearance, the 17th of December, and there were no signs of sexual violence. However, the body was found far from her apartment, which raised many questions for investigators. Why did the body end up here? Where has it been days? Why did her outerwear and shoes disappear? And where did the pizza she bought, which was never found, go? After Joanna's body was discovered, the investigation took a new turn. Now it was no longer just a disappearance, but a murder investigation. However, despite the discovery of the body, the police had too little evidence to figure out exactly who might have been involved in the crime. The police began checking everyone who might have been in contact with Joanna that evening. The standard procedure was to check on her boyfriend, Greg Wrighton. However, his alibi was immutable. He was in Sheffield, which was confirmed by his employers, phone records, and surveillance cameras in the city. He himself actively cooperated with the investigation and voluntarily provided all the necessary information, so Greg couldn't have been involved in Joanna's disappearance. However, the investigation continued, and the investigators' attention shifted to other people from her inner circle. They started checking on neighbors and acquaintances, and also drew attention to her landlord, Christopher Jeffries. Christopher Jeffries is a 65-year-old man, an English teacher, who rented an apartment to Joanna and her boyfriend. He lived in the same building, just a few steps from her apartment. According to neighbors, Jeffries was an eccentric and strange man. Although he worked as an intellectual, his behavior sometimes seemed frightening, and several people mentioned seeing him near Joanna's apartment on the day of her disappearance. Some even claimed that he could spy on the tenants, although these claims have not been confirmed. When the police questioned him, he could not give a clear explanation of his whereabouts on the night of Joanna's disappearance. This aroused even more suspicion. As a result, based on these circumstances, the police decided to arrest Christopher Jeffries. On the 30th of December 2010, police arrested Christopher Jeffries, Joanna Yates' landlord, as the main suspect in her disappearance and murder. The news of his arrest spread quickly in the media, and soon his name became a symbol of an eccentric and suspicious man. The journalist did not miss the opportunity to launch a real media campaign, creating a scandal around his identity, which in fact meant an accusation without evidence.
Chris Jeffries was arrested over a murder he didn't commit. He's an innocent man who was put under enormous media scrutiny.
However, the investigators soon found out that the suspicions were wrong. Despite his eccentric behavior and the oddities associated with his personality, no evidence has been found that could confirm his involvement in the murder. There were no fingerprints on Joanna's body, he had no motive, and his alibi turned out to be quite convincing. Christopher was released, but his reputation was already ruined. He later filed a lawsuit against newspapers that accused him of murder and won the case. But despite this, the investigation remained at an impasse. The police couldn't find any other suspects, and time kept running out while the real killer was still at large. After Jeffrey's release, the police returned to their original plan to thoroughly check Joanna's neighbors, including those who lived next to her. One of those neighbors was Vincent Tabak, a 32-year-old Dutch engineer who lived in the apartment next door to Joanna. At first glance, he didn't look suspicious. He was intelligent, well-educated, and had no criminal record. He did not come to the attention of police and led a quiet, secluded lifestyle.
The investigation later moved on to Yates's neighbour, Vincent Tabak.
However, as the investigation progressed, disturbing facts came to light. The first of these was Tabak's testimony about the events of the 17th of December, 2010. During the initial interrogation, he claimed that he did not notice anything strange that evening, but soon his testimony began to change. He added details that he did not mention at the beginning, which aroused the suspicions of the investigators. The police decided to check his mobile data. This led to unexpected results. In contrast to his story, Tabak's phone activity indicated that on the night of the murder, his cell phone was in the area where Joanna's body was later found. This meant that he was in this place, possibly at the time when the body was dumped. The second disturbing moment was his behavior after the body was discovered. Tabak's colleagues and acquaintances noted his unusual behavior. He showed excessive interest in the investigation, read every news item, discussed with people how difficult it would be to find the killer, and even commented on the investigation on television. It later became clear that this behavior was not just curiosity, but rather a manifestation of excitement and anxiety. However, his attempts to hide some aspects of his behavior became fatal for him. Police discovered that he had erased certain search queries from his computer, including investigative materials, and was looking for ways to dispose of the body and conceal evidence. This data became sufficient to obtain an arrest warrant for Tabak. On the 20th of January 2011, Vincent Tabak was officially arrested on suspicion of the murder of Joanna Yates. When the police came to his house, he looked calm, but his eyes betrayed tension. He did not resist, but during the interrogation his behavior became increasingly nervous, and he began to avoid answering important questions. The police searched his apartment, hoping to find traces of blood, DNA, or other evidence that could confirm his involvement in the murder. However, the apartment was surprisingly clean. There were no visible signs of a crime. But the most important discovery was made while researching his internet activity. The investigators had the opportunity to prove that he had lied about his whereabouts on the night of the murder. Surveillance cameras and mobile data showed that his phone was in the area where the body was found. Vincent Tabak refused to confess to the murder for a long time, but after several days of interrogation and pressure from the police, he suddenly changed his tactics. He claimed that Joanna's murder was accidental. According to him, he tried to hug her, she screamed, and he did not calculate the force, clamped her mouth, which led to her death. However, his version did not match the evidence. Firstly, death by strangulation required a minimum of 20 seconds, which meant that he could not accidentally strangle her. Secondly, her body was moved several miles from the crime scene, which indicated that the killer acted deliberately and purposefully, trying to get rid of the evidence. Thirdly, experts found traces of abrasions and bruises on her body, which indicated that there had been a physical struggle between the victim and the killer. These facts destroyed Tabak's false version, and he finally admitted that he had committed the murder intentionally. The investigation revealed that on the evening of the 17th of December, 2010, Vincent Tabak somehow lured Joanna to his apartment. Perhaps he offered to help her, or asked her to come by on some business. When she entered his apartment, he suddenly attacked her, trying to strangle her. After the murder, he kept the body in his apartment, thinking about what to do next. However, as the attention to her disappearance intensified, he decided to get rid of the body. He threw it into Fairland, hoping that the snow would cover up the traces of the crime and the body would be difficult to find. But his plan failed. When the body was discovered, the evidence became increasingly clear, and the police were able to gather evidence that allowed them to arrest the killer and confirm his guilt. After the arrest of Vincent Tabak, accused of the murder of Joanna Yates, the case turned into a trial, which became a real test for all parties. The trial began in October 2011 and attracted huge public and media attention. The prosecution claimed that Tabak killed his neighbor intentionally and knowingly, while the defense tried to convince the court that the incident was accidental. stating that the murder was the result of an accident without intent. From the very beginning, the prosecutors based their defense on the fact that the murder was cold-blooded and carefully planned. They stressed that despite the defendant's attempts to portray himself as an unhappy person who had fallen victim to an accidental situation, all the facts pointed to something else. Tobacco's defense, on the other hand, insisted that Joanna's death was the result of an unfortunate incident. They claimed that when Joanna screamed, startled by something, he accidentally clamped his hand over her mouth, not calculating the force. According to the defense, he never wanted to kill her and did not realize that she could die. However, this version was completely refuted by the evidence. Experts confidently stated that death was caused by strangulation, and the length of this process and the absence of signs of struggle indicated deliberate actions by the killer. Moreover, the defense version did not explain why the accused hid the body and tried to conceal the evidence. As in the case of his attempts to change his testimony, all these details only increased doubts about the veracity of his words. In addition, the experts drew attention to the psychological profile of the accused. Despite his calm and balanced behavior, they noticed that he had signs of sadistic tendencies, which could also indicate premeditation of murder. Despite the defense's attempts to exonerate his client, the court took into account all the facts that indicated his guilt. The prosecutors have demonstrated convincing evidence refuting any version of chance. The psychological assessment, the analysis of mobile data, the results of the forensic examination, and the behavior of the accused after the murder left no doubt. The stakes were high, and during the trial it became increasingly clear that Vincent Tabak was not an accidental victim of circumstances. After 3 weeks of intense deliberations, the jury retired to reach a verdict. They discussed the case for 2 days, carefully weighing all the evidence and versions. And in the end, they came to a decision. Vincent Tabak was found guilty of the premeditated murder of Joanna Yates. The judge, taking into account all the circumstances, ordered a life sentence with a minimum term of 20 years. This meant that Tabak had to spend at least 2 decades in prison before he would be given the opportunity to apply for parole. The trial was an important moment in solving the crime, but it also demonstrated the importance of thorough investigation and immunity to false excuses. Despite the defendant's attempts to conceal his actions and behavior, the facts spoke for themselves, and justice eventually prevailed.